Today's episode is one I've been both looking forward to and admittedly a little nervous about because we're diving into some deeply complex and emotionally charged terrain. We're talking about infant nutrition, formula marketing, and maternal health in Nigeria, with a focus on how global systems, not individual choices, shape the options available to mothers. Let me start by saying this. However you have fed your baby, breast, bottle, both, there's no judgment here. This conversation is not about shaming parents. It's about shining a light on the bigger picture, the ways predatory marketing, systemic inequality, and broken infrastructure can limit access to safe, sustainable feeding options. We're also very aware that conversations involving Westerners talking about Africa can veer into uncomfortable territory. The white savior narrative, oversimplification, or unintentional condescension can often occur in these conversations. We want to name that up front. Our goal here is humility, learning, and amplifying the work of people who are on the ground doing the work with cultural insight and care. Which brings me to today's guest, Mandolin Krotz, co-founder of Carry the Ministries, based in Jos, Nigeria. Mandolin and her team support mothers and babies facing severe malnutrition, and they do it with compassion, cultural fluency, and a deep commitment to ethical care. We're going to talk about what she's seeing firsthand, what predatory formula marketing looks like in practice, and how her team empowers families with both knowledge and support. I am aware that these conversations, we are combining two very hot topic situations here. We're talking about infant nutrition, formula, breastfeeding. That's its own entanglement of hot topic buttons. And then we're also white people talking about things that are going on in Africa. My whole goal of this particular episode is to raise awareness that formula companies, they're preying on vulnerable populations, and they are being insanely profitable doing this. I also want to remind our listeners, this is something that we went over briefly in the previous episode, but I want to remind you guys, there is the World Health Organization Code of Conduct, okay, that for formula and formula marketing. The World Health Organization has weighed in on this and has been weighing in on this since 1981 to protect breastfeeding and to prevent aggressive marketing of infant formula and related products. The problem is this code of conduct, it is not law. It is not something that is because the World Health Organization says it, then that means that's the law of the land. No, the country has to actually adopt it and enforce it. But the WHO code prohibits direct advertising of formula to the public, prohibits free samples to parents, gifts, sponsorships, or incentives to healthcare workers, promotional materials in hospitals or clinics, idealizing in formula ads, implying that it's good or that it's better than breast milk. So just know that all of these practices that we've been hearing about in the last episode, in this current episode, is against this World Health Organization code of conduct when it comes to the marketing of breast milk substitutes. 820,000 child lives could be saved every year if all babies were breastfed exclusively for the first 6 months and continued up to age 2. Mothers exposed to formula marketing were 3 times more likely to partially or fully formula feed in the early months. 1 in 3 women report feeling guilted or confused by conflicting infant feeding messages from healthcare professionals and marketing. Now, these are all statistics from the World Health Organization from 2022. So remember that as we are having these conversations, that there are not only guidelines in place to prohibit this from happening, but there are wild statistics out there showing that it's having a serious impact on women, children, and families all over the world, globally speaking. And we don't talk a lot about global issues here. We talk a lot about US-based issues, but I feel like sometimes it's good to broaden our perspective and widen the lens. And this is one of the areas that I feel like it's good to see.
We're doing some really fun pivoting here. Like we're pivoting from just talking about using data and talking about issues, but kind of like pulling the veil back on some systematic things. Like we've done through, research and in educating on our podcast and on our TikTok, but to speak to professionals that are working in these industries and then getting information firsthand from them, not just data that's readily available, is a powerful thing to pull, like I said, pull the veil back and show, hey, these are the real things that are going on.
Yeah, and these things that we're pulling the veil back on are affecting the demographic that we speak on.
Right.
Women, children, vulnerable groups.
Mm-hmm. I would love to talk to somebody who works in banking or in finance about things pertaining to women, or more healthcare providers and things in the U.S., the things that they've witnessed in the U.S. regarding care for women.
Yeah, if you are one of those individuals, I don't care where you live, like even if you have more of a global perspective from a different country and you have interest in talking about those things, we are open. Please email us at pinkpillrx@gmail.com. I would love to connect with you and have conversations with you around these things.
Yeah, and even if you majored in women's studies and have, maybe you have a history degree and you know a lot more about the history of women's rights, and you think you have information that our listeners would benefit from, we'd love to hear from you too. I want to say something specifically because we talk a lot about Nestle as a company in this podcast episode, and just so the listeners know, Nestle is a Swiss company. It's a parent company for a lot of other companies, but it's a Swiss company. But there are a lot of American brands, U.S. brands owned by Nestle. So if you want to know some of these that Nestle owns in the U.S., so this is going to hurt me because two of these on here I love. And I don't know if I could buy these anymore. Nestle Toll House cookies, Hot Pockets, Lean Cuisine, DiGiorno Pizza, Nescafe Instant Coffee, Nestea, the iced tea, Gerber, Purina One, dog food, Fancy Feast for cats, Alpo dog food, Tidy Cats for cat litter, Haagen-Dazs ice cream, and Nestle ice cream. So those are U.S. brands that Nestle owns.
Thank you for joining us today for this episode. We really appreciate your listening ears. And again, this is not an indictment on any individual person. This is a systemic issue that we're dealing with.
Yes. Like Katie said, we want to welcome Mandolin Kratz, who is the co-founder and president of Carry Them Ministries, a nonprofit organization based in Jos, Nigeria, dedicated to combating the devastating effects of severe infant malnutrition and maternal mortality. Mandolin, a devoted wife and mother of three, has channeled her passion into creating a beacon of hope for families facing unimaginable challenges. Through Carry Them Ministries, she leads a team that provides critical nutritional support, certified lactation consulting, and cross-cultural education to mothers and caregivers. Their mission is to ensure that every infant receives the nourishment and care needed to thrive, and that mothers are empowered with the knowledge and resources to support their children's health. Under Mandolin's leadership, Carry Them Ministries has served over 680 babies, offering life-saving interventions and fostering sustainable support systems for families in need, specifically families dealing with severe malnutrition. Her unwavering commitment to this cause has not only transformed individual lives, but has also brought international attention to the urgent issues of infant malnutrition and maternal health in Nigeria. You can learn more about their impactful work at carrythem.org and follow their journey on Instagram at carrythemministries.
Welcome, Mandolin. Thank you so much for being here, especially in light of our miscommunication.
It's fine. Thanks for having me.
Mandolin didn't realize we were going to be recording today because of my own miscommunication. But despite that, she has still agreed to be here with us. So I'm very appreciative of that.
I'm grateful to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. So you are currently on furlough then for the next 2 months in the States with your family. Okay.
Right. We have about 3 weeks left.
Okay. And she's taken some time off while she's at the beach to talk to us. So that's really, really nice. So can you start by telling us anything you would like to add to what we mentioned about what you guys do, and just in general, what inspired you to start this work? Like, how did it begin?
Sure. Yeah. So it really began with, I was a mom and I had just noticed in our community, I had gone to Nigeria originally to be a teacher. Me and my husband did. And so we were in Jos, Nigeria for about 2 years. And we had our daughter who was adopted and then my first son. And we had just seen, along with a couple other women in the community, how many moms were struggling with a severely malnourished infant. And it was so common, and we couldn't quite figure out what was going on because a lot of times the mother seemed healthy and it wasn't like a food shortage or anything. And lactation care was the biggest thing missing. So I just noticed they were really struggling with breastfeeding. And so I became a lactation consultant in the US through the Academy of Lactation Policy and Practice. And so that I could offer that out of my living room. So I stopped being a teacher. I offered that out of my living room. It was one lady at first, and then it was 10 ladies. And then before you knew it, I had like 30 to 40 moms coming every week to my house for lactation care, and their babies were able to survive and get out of kind of this spiral of being severely malnourished. And they invited other moms. And so that's kind of how Carry Them started, was just a couple women in the community that had seen this issue, opening up our living rooms and then offering that care and that support. And so I think the biggest thing is that it never would have grown or gotten any bigger if there weren't other Nigerian women in our community that saw the need and that had a heart for other moms and that joined me. So I have Helen and Joy and Sarah and Rosemary and a whole staff of Nigerian moms in Nigeria that love these women too. And they have come alongside me to translate it into the language, to go to hospitals with me and to go into their villages and share this information because it can be so impactful in saving infant lives.
That's really cool that that it's the community that's coming around this as well, because there is a lot of talk around like the white savior complex and the idea that Westerners, especially white people, can sometimes reinforce colonial dynamics.
I think that's a really fair critique that we're seeing with like this idea that white people come in and know everything and tell you what to do. I mean, that's just not sustainable. It's just not. And it's also just like disrespectful to a lot of the norms that they've had over the last, all of their forever. And so it's just what I found so encouraging is you don't just go into hospitals and say this is the right way to do it, because realistically you leave and they'll do what they want. But if you can start with one mom and come alongside them and say, hey, this is the latest research on lactation care, skin to skin after birth, nursing frequently, nursing on demand, not starting formula right away, just a few things that this is research based, not coming and say, hey, this is what you're doing wrong, this is what you should do right. But if you start with a mom and then she sees a difference, okay, she's had 3 babies, 2 of them are severely malnourished or even have passed away from starvation, this is the first baby that has survived or has been a healthy weight, they're going to tell their sister or their cousin or their friend, and they're going to tell their friends. And so what we've seen, the biggest impact is really just coming from one mom to another mom to another mom. It doesn't matter if the formula company is in the hospital telling these moms to give formula. If they've seen that their children who have been given formula are severely malnourished because they can't afford it, but the one that was breastfed and that went through these practices are actually thriving. And so it's going to come from that perspective. And I also just feel like you have to be willing to set aside expectations. So it might look a lot different in the West, how we care for our young right after they're born. But if I came in and said, no, do it this way, and we don't do baths, or I don't know, there's just so many different things in the village than they're going to do in the US. And you just have to start with the basics. Hey, like support that mom right after birth. Like I wouldn't come in and say there's one way to do this. I would just be open to, okay, these are some really harmful practices and this is the research behind that. Let's try and see if we see a difference.
What are the biggest challenges you've seen on the ground when it comes to infant malnutrition and maternal health in Nigeria?
So 2 of the main things, I would say one is just a lack of support for the mother after birth. There's a lot of like stigma around if they're married or not, or how many children they've had, or where they gave birth. And there's so much that happens after birth that can separate a mother and a baby. A lot of it is like the over medicalization. We work with a local hospital clinic there that has an over 80% C-section rate. So we come in and we're trying to do postpartum rounds, and we recognize, okay, there's 9 women that went into labor and that came in the last night. All of them got C-sections back to back. None of them were allowed to labor overnight, and all of them have been separated from it. So there's a whole like system and connection that says, hey, just give baby formula after the baby's born for a few days, and then let the mother recover from the C-section and bring the baby back to the mother, and she can start breastfeeding, and that's fine. That's the best thing to do. Or C-sections are really hard on a mom. So why don't we just let her rest for a few days and give the baby formula? And that all makes sense because the mother's resting and because the baby's getting fed. But of course, if you don't understand how important it is to stimulate those hormones and skin to skin and bonding, then you wouldn't realize the detriment that you can make whenever, 2 weeks down the road, this woman is engorged. She hasn't really had a chance to breastfeed. She's only put the baby to breast a couple times. The baby is used to formula in a bottle now, and her supply is struggling, and we can't provide formula anymore. We can't afford it. We could only afford that first can. So because of that, now we don't have formula. We have to give the baby water. The baby's weak. The baby can't latch. There's just such a spiral that I'm seeing over and over again. I mean, literally 3 to 5 babies per week come to me with the same exact story, that they were given formula. They didn't try to breastfeed until a few days or even weeks later. They're too weak. They're getting water. We can't provide formula. The baby's too malnourished, too weak to suck. And yeah, so it's a never ending story. I think it's really important to hear like the cost. So many of the families that come to me are making like 30,000 naira a month. So right now with the exchange rate, that's around $20 a month is like how much they're making as a family income wise. Now formula is going to be about, let's see, 9,000 a can, about 10,000 a can. You're looking at about this at least, let's see, 3 a week, 10 cans, 10,000. You're looking at like at least 50,000 naira to 80,000 naira. So that's way closer to 30 to $40 in just formula costs if you're measuring correctly. And so if you're making $20 a month total, and formula costs $40 or $50 a month, let alone twins, which is the highest rate of the world in twins, or highest rate in the world of twins in Nigeria, then there's just no hope in being able to provide that formula. So really soon, first can is gone in a few days. Now we add more water. Okay, now we're grinding corn to use that as formula. So it's just not attainable. It's not so much it's not available. I think a lot of people think that when I talk about this, that formula just doesn't exist in Nigeria. It's definitely everywhere. However, it's just not attainable to the average Nigerian.
Wow. How we kind of got in contact is you reached out after I did a video about the Nestle scandal back in the 70s and 80s. I believe it was the 70s and 80s, where they were going into hospitals dressed as nurses, dressed as doctors. They were convincing these women to formula feed, and like you're saying, they would start formula feeding, and then obviously we would have milk supply problems. They would go home. They can't afford the formula, or the water isn't clean enough to use the formula. And a lot of times the formula is not even in the correct language for them to understand how to properly constitute it. And you messaged me and was like, hey, I could talk to you about how this is still going on today, because I was talking to it as like a past event that like, oh, this was a huge thing that was, I think it was responsible for 212,000 infant deaths, they estimated yearly back then. But you're saying, hey, this is still going on today. So tell me, how are formula, like what are the predatory marketing practices that you see going on in Nigeria in these hospitals and communities?
Yeah, absolutely. See, because when I hear about that scandal, I always hear as this is what happened. But I see the effects in it right now with hundreds, thousands. I mean, I'm in a city of 1 million people. It's not even 220 million, I think, is the population in Nigeria. So I am only seeing a small population of Nigeria, 1 million people in my city. This is affecting hundreds of thousands of babies, millions of babies, really, continuously. And so for me, how I see it is it trickled down from that, because now the grandmothers, so the 70s and 80s, now those are the grandmothers. So they're the ones coming to the births, because the mothers-in-laws and the grandmothers are always the ones that are going to come to the births. They also have culturally the most say about how the birth happens, practices after the birth, caring for the mother. So they're the ones that are in those hospital rooms, and they're the ones that believe that formula is better. The doctors, the nurses, a lot of them also believe this. And so they'll say, yeah, formula feed, it's even required. You have to bring formula, which is really expensive for a Nigerian, to the birth so that they could start feeding the baby. And this is a healthy birth. She was required to bring it. And of course, if you're going to spend that much money on it, you're going to give it to the baby. And so, they just say mix it till it looks like milk. There's no measurements to give. A lot of people don't speak English. They definitely can't read. A lot of them can't read English. So to even look at the instructions on the can is out of the question. Just mix it till it looks like milk. Okay, now we're running out of it. Now it can be more water. And you can see how really quickly the baby is just getting water by a couple weeks old. And also, I think it's important, even what I can see right now is when you're in hospitals and clinics, you see these big posters. I've taken a couple pictures of them before, but you see these big posters, and they're Nestle, like they have like the Nestle logo on them. And they say, breast milk is best for your baby. So it's like they're acting like they're championing the cost of breastfeeding. But one, it's in English, and most all of the women at these clinics that I'm at do not read or speak English. So they don't know what it's saying. All they're seeing are big posters in the hospital of a Nestle logo. That's all they're seeing. And so they're thinking, this is what the hospital wants me to feed formula. The hospital, you know what I mean? Or they're even handing out like samples. Like we've been there where they hand out like older samples. And it's kind of like the idea of like a junk food company saying, eat your vegetables while handing out like cupcakes. It's just, I mean, you're handing it out. It's right there. And you're dressed in kind of like they're not dressed in nurse or doctor's uniforms anymore, these representatives, but there are huge indicators throughout everywhere that I go, at least where there's a place of birth that says formula is best. It's best. It's what the most wealthy families use. Yeah. So there's definitely like this stigma even around breastfeeding that it's kind of like what the most impoverished families will do.
So manipulative.
Yeah. So they've made it to where it's like, yeah, that it's a economic status symbol of some sort of being, you know, that the formula is what you're saying, right? Is that more economically advantaged people feed formula and then poor people breastfeed.
Right. So when I'm offering lactation services to a lot of these mothers that are coming to me, they're just like, no. Like, I know that they just can't believe that I'm championing lactation care because they're like, you are this white woman. You know what's best for babies. You have money. You know, formula is what's best for my baby. Like they genuinely believe because they've been told that formula is what is best and is the healthiest option. And if I really want to help their severely malnourished, starving baby, I would just give them formula instead of donor milk or help them with their breast milk supply. They find it to be very like rude or unkind of me to not just give them a bunch of formula, which of course formula does save lives. So I should say that. I don't want to sit here and be like anti-formula at all times. It's saved, you know, as many as 680 lives in our clinic because of the maternal mortality crisis. And so many of the mothers are passing away in childbirth. Of course, that's a completely other side of the conversation is how many of the women are passing away in childbirth. But yeah, like exactly what you said. It's just this thing that formula is best at all times.
I am curious to know about the maternal mortality rate. Like, are you aware of what that is currently there?
Yes, yeah. So there's a few different ways you can say it to put it in perspective in the U.S. In the U.S., it's 1 in 4,900, which I think you know is the high. I don't know if you know it's the highest in the developed world. 1 in 4,900 women die in childbirth. In Nigeria, it's 1 in 22. 1 in 22 women.
Gosh.
So I believe if another way to look at it is for every one woman that dies in the U.S. in childbirth, 236 women die in Nigeria in childbirth. I'm not sure where it's ranked right now. I want to say it's second behind India for maternal mortality, but it is so devastatingly common. Over half of my clients in the clinic are going to be coming after the death of the mother, which historically has meant within 1 or 2 or 3 days, maybe a couple weeks, the baby will pass away as well because there's no breast milk option. And because of a lot of the cultural beliefs, there's not a lot of wet nursing. Somebody else isn't going to nurse the baby back to health. So the baby will pass away from starvation. So what we do is we come alongside the family. We offer relactation, but usually all the nutrition needs for the first 6 to 8 months so that the baby can be healthy and be sustainably fed at home by the end of that critical period.
What are some of the main causes of this incredibly high mortality rate?
You know, there's so many, and I think it depends on the environment. Like I said, the C-section rate is really high in some of the clinics, and I'm seeing that a lot of these mothers are passing away day 3 or 4 after they've had their C-section. They're back home, and they're getting infections. There's not a lot of follow-up care because of the high rate of poverty. People just can't afford to go back to the hospital if they're having complications to get care. They've already spent all the money that they could on the C-section itself. And so transportation is a big one. I've had a couple moms who passed away because of a lack of a transportation to get back to the hospital, or they have to be on a motorbike. So like 1 or 2 days post C-section on a motorcycle through the village trying to get back to the hospital. They don't make it. But there's also postpartum hemorrhage is a huge one. and unassisted births out because of stigma. They've been like kind of pushed out of their village or pushed out of their community, and so they're birthing alone. And so they'll find the baby, but the mother's already passed away. So there's a lot of different circumstances surrounding it. We've seen lots of things. I mean, in the north, I believe the latest statistic that I heard is the average woman has 12 births in kind of like north of Nigeria. And so a lot of that is going to be first one C-section. By the time you have your 12th birth, that's a really high risk C-section.
Wow. Sorry, this is like all new information to me. So I'm just like processing it as you're telling me it. So you help with lactation, relactation, breastfeeding support. But when these children come to you, I'm assuming, and you alluded to this, that obviously you're using formula in some of these circumstances because these are urgent situations where these babies need to eat. How I'm just curious to know how that is all funded.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I started in my living room with just a few moms. And so I had reached out to a few people in the US that we were close to and kind of said, this is a baby has just come to me. The mother's passed away, 3 months old, only 5 pounds. Would you be willing to sponsor the costs of the next 6 to 8 months of us coming alongside the aunt, teaching her how to use formula, how to properly feed? There's a lot of other things we're up against too, which I won't get into all of it, but a big belief is that you have to thicken the formula with ground corn or other things, and then you force feed the baby, which cause aspiration. There's a lot of issues medically that comes with force feeding. They hold the baby's nose to force feed, and so that's kind of a big belief that the baby's severely malnourished because they haven't been fed enough, like kind of heavy material, and so they'll grind corn, boil it, and make something called pap, and add that to the formula to make it thicker. Force feed the baby, which causes aspiration. Anyway, it can make them more and more sick. So we're up against a lot of that. So we have to stay close, building relationship, and helping support them through the whole 6 to 8 month process to make sure that this is being done in a healthy way. We're rehabilitating this child without the trauma of force feeding. And then, yeah, they're able to go home in a healthy way. So I kind of had to ask for help after a while because 40 women coming to me per week, it just got to the point where we weren't able to personally, our own family, cover the cost of formula for all these babies coming. And so, yeah, a few families partnered with me that way. And then in the summer of 2023, I had my second son, and I was breastfeeding a lot of the babies that were brought to me myself, just because I had an oversupply. And you see a severely malnourished infant brought to your front door and the mother just passed away, and it's just something that I just started doing. So I started breastfeeding some of the babies, and I always asked for permission from the aunties and the grandmothers, and they didn't feel right about wet nursing in their own villages and communities, but they were totally fine to have me do it. And so anyway, someone took a video of me doing that, posted it on our Instagram at the time, and that video had gone viral within a few months. And so it's just like I think it's a 4 or 5 second video. It's really of nothing but the other angle of me nursing one of the babies from the village. And so because of that, we got probably like 30 to 40 families that I was able to connect with over email and over social media to ask for partnerships and taking more babies in, and it's grown from there. So our Carry Them account now, Carry Them Ministries on Instagram, is a huge way I get funding, just because I'm able to once in a while share a story, and then and people make donations for me to be able to keep taking new babies.
How much does it cost to support a baby through, or a family to support a family through that 6 to 8 month process?
Yeah, it can be anything. So of course, like I said, we get a lot of twins. We have triplets right now. I would say 40% of our clients are twins, just because of the super high rate of twins there. And then, so all that's going to be, a lot of them are severely, they need to be in a hospital for a long time just to be monitored, but also they might have some brain damage from the malnutrition in the first few months, seizures, things like that. So some of them are really high cost because I'm keeping them in the hospital for a couple months at a time. And some of them just genuinely need supply help, a little bit of supplemental formula, and then the mom's breast milk supply can increase, and then she's able to fully sustain the feeds, and then we just come alongside them with other support. So that's a lot of it, not cheaper, but less cost. So we average it around $80 a month if we take all the babies and try to create like a middle number. So that's how much a sponsorship is. And that way if people are sponsoring a baby through that, then they're going to be able to cover the needs of a really like of a higher need baby, but also, yeah, we can average it that way.
So you brought up a really good point. These babies are medically fragile, and some of them
Mhm.
need hospitalization. What kind of medical management is happening here, or how do you assess that? Do you have a medical background, or do you employ anybody in the community that does, or how does that work?
Yeah, we partner with local clinics and hospitals. So we have one smaller clinic that we always take emergency cases to, just because they can assess whether or not we really need to go to like a much bigger teaching hospital or whether they can monitor the baby there. Um, 680 babies. I just have so many stories of how that can look like. There's been a few babies that have come to me. They've traveled for 10, 15 hours from a village because they heard about me. The baby's severely malnourished, starving. They haven't been able to feed it formula. And by the time it gets to me, it doesn't make it. And it's just a few hours before the baby passes away. So we always rush the baby off to the clinic to see if there's anything we can do. But a few babies have passed away just as we get to the clinic or just right afterwards. And so that's always like the hardest cases. But there's been so many that have been that close, but because of the interventive care um, and the monitoring and everything that can happen, and the slow feeding, the refeeding syndrome, like all the things that we can do over the next few months, we've seen so many miracles happen too. That yeah, it's really encouraging. And yeah, so there's a lot of babies too with Down syndrome or cerebral palsy or things like that that come from the villages. And so there might be another reason that they're struggling with malnutrition, maybe the muscle tone. It's not always because of the feeding issues, but because of something else. And they haven't had the access to medical care just for someone to tell them, oh, your baby has Down syndrome. They have the reason they're having a hard time feeding is because of this muscle tone thing going on. Like they don't know any of that. They don't have any access to medical care. So they come to us. We're able to see that, take them to a hospital and get different proper care. But yeah, we've had preemies come as little as, I think the smallest we had was like 2.2 pounds. And we're driving around all over the city looking for a like an incubator or something, a NICU, and all 5 NICUs we went to were completely full and nobody could take the baby. And so we just brought them back to our house and did our best to keep her warm until we finally got a call a few days later that an incubator had opened. So as far as access to medical care, it's just really, really different than we'll see in the US.
Is that's I can't imagine the emotional toll of all of that. Does that number that you gave, now I know you said it varies depending on severity of case, but does that number that you gave, that mid number, include some of these hospital visits or stays?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
you're
the
paying
medical
for that
care
as well?
is. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we cover all of that. And even, I know this is kind of hard and you can cut this if you want to, but
Okay.
the burial costs too, if a baby passes away, we just know the family most of the time, if they're spending all their money they can to travel from a faraway village to get to us. And if that baby passes away, the hospital gives you a bill before you can collect the body. And so we'll cover all of that too and cover the transport for them back to their village so that they can honor and grieve the baby. And so yeah, we cover any costs at all associated with working with us.
Do all babies get medical assessment, even if, they're not to the eye severely malnourished?
Um, no, if there's babies coming and they just are skinny and the
Hmm.
mother has very low breast milk and they're giving a lot of water, then I won't necessarily take them to the clinic to be looked at. However, we do have a lot of local doctors that are volunteering with us all the time, so we do have a lot of eyes on the baby. So once in a while, someone will be like, this one looks like it has severe thrush all the way down her throat. Like, let's get this one into the hospital. So there's definitely eyes on those things, but not every single one of them is taken into the hospital.
Okay. But seeing you is going to increase the chances of obviously getting the proper medical care that is needed by being
Yeah,
assessed by them.
absolutely. What's hard is that there's a lot of babies that are brought to us because they've heard so many have survived through Carry Them that aren't severely malnourished. And we can't just open our clinic to all the sick babies in all of Nigeria, 220 million people in Nigeria. So if somebody brings us children that are sick, where we have to say we are a clinic that specializes in severe malnutrition, and so that is the kind of clients that we can take. Your child has malaria or typhoid or something. I don't know. I'm not a doctor, so I never diagnose anyone, but please take this baby straight to the hospital. This isn't the place for them. So that can be really sad and hard to see.
The fact that you guys will cover the travel expenses for these people to go back to their village with their babies who have passed away and cover the cost for them to honor their child. That's a very holistic way to serve these families. I just think that's incredible. I just want to make that as a comment, not really a question.
Oh, thank you. I feel like it's a privilege. Sometimes I feel like it's the greatest privilege in the world to get to know these little lives that no one maybe has ever known except for a sweet mom and a father who just lost hope on survival, and they travel far, and they I meet them and I get to know the baby's name, and maybe I only know the baby a few hours, and maybe the baby passes away, but what a privilege to be one of the few people that met and got to know and that child.
What happens to these mothers who obviously are recognizing that their child is in great distress if they go like directly to like a hospital? Like why would they come to you first before going? Because I'm just trying to wrap my brain around it, because obviously I'm
Sure.
from the West and I have access to medical care, and that's really privileged. But I think a lot of our listeners also might be wondering that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's because the money. Most of them, I mean, a lot of them, they're in such a severe case. We just had a baby. I think I shared about this one on our social media under Peter, but he had been starving for 6 weeks. But they knew that they couldn't afford even the entrance fee. So in a hospital, you don't get care until you pay ahead of time. You always pay up front. So they knew they couldn't afford the transport to the hospital, let alone a hospital bill. So when they had heard, oh, there's this free clinic that deals with severely malnourished infants, they'll cover the cost. They came to me, but at that point it was too late and we had lost Peter. But for the first 6 weeks, that baby was, suffering very seriously. And I kept being like, why did you I have compassion and I understand they did the best they can. But of course I asked, why did you wait so long? And they said, we didn't know about you. We didn't know there was a free option. We didn't have the money to take him in. We didn't have anything else. So it's always the cost associated. But a lot of my babies do come from the hospitals because the hospitals know about me now, especially the ones in the area. So they'll say, your baby's just malnourished, your baby's just starving. There's nothing we can do here. Or you can't afford our services. You can go to carry them.
Wow. So you have it sounds like you have really good relationships with
Oh,
your
yeah.
local medical facilities, which is amazing.
Yeah, for the most part. There's some times where I'm frustrated because a baby will come at a couple months old and I'll say, where did you deliver? And they tell me where they delivered. And I'll say, okay, how did it go? And they'll say, oh, the doctor told me to give formula. And it's like, did they teach you how to mix it? Is there a reason they didn't want you to breastfeed? Did they know you can't afford more than one can for the rest of this baby's life? So then there's times where I'm like, mental note, I'm going to go to that clinic. And, actually, I don't have time to go to every clinic that I've heard that are telling moms to just give formula and not breastfeed. However, I do have a good relationship with them, but I also am hopeful that starts to change. And I am very vocal about the fact that I'm the ones that are seeing these babies at 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks old, severely malnourished. You guys don't see them. You just say, hey, feed formula and go home. And you never see the effects of that. I do.
What role does like international advocacy or support play in fighting back against these harmful practices, this harmful marketing practices of formula, the predatory practices, and just in general internationally? Like what can we do to help support what you do, but also just the bigger problem at large?
Yeah. I really feel like we have to get back to including moms in the birth. So much of what I see in Nigeria is like the mom is giving birth, but she has no idea like what's going on or what's going on afterwards. Or, I mean, there's some prenatal classes, but very few. It's like you do what you're told, and that is that's all. And so if the mother was supported in the way that was like, hey, you know, this, you are capable of doing this. Here's lactation support. If that doesn't work, here's another option. Like will send a lot of money for formula and for food, like foreign aid, all these things. They're happy to go in with backpacks, with whatever. But if we were able to empower the local Nigerian people to learn about this research about breastfeeding, for example, and help each other with it, and then just leave, and they'll be the ones to educate. They'll be the ones to see the difference. Then I think that makes the biggest difference. And I also feel like I have these dreams like formula that's made in the country. So a big thing with Nestle that is really frustrating is it's all imported. So the costs are so high. And so when it is needed by a family, no, I mean, they can't afford it, but it's so regulated that you can't, it's not like you can get something that's made local that's like a different option. There's laws and all these things about importing. Like I can't even import formula that's donated to the ministry into the country. I have to buy it from Nestle at a super high price within the country, which they're going to be profiting from. So there's so many other things that we have to take a look at. Like this company knows what it's doing. It has to. I know it's saving lives. I use it every day,
It's
but
got a
they know.
monopoly, it sounds like.
Yes, they know that this is the only option for a lot of families that will give everything that they have to save the life of their baby. Why is it that it isn't more accessible? At least for the ones that need it. And if you really do care, like it says on the can, on the Nestle can, breast milk is best for your babies, then why are we not putting all of the funds, all of the crazy amount of money that they're making, um, towards lactation care? Like, why am I the only certified lactation professional, except for all the Nigerians that every year we put two of my staff through the ALPP, so that we have more and more certified lactation professionals every year. And we do lots of trainings in hospitals, but I mean, I don't understand why there isn't more education about, healthy practices and lactation care. Everywhere you go, there's the words, breast milk is best for your baby. You see that everywhere. But I don't, people need support.
Yeah, and in that situation, it's not just breast milk is best for your baby. Breast milk could be the difference between life or death with your baby, which is, that is different in the Western world. There is, I mean, I'm not saying that poverty isn't a real issue and that people can't afford formula here, because there's plenty of people who struggle to afford formula. But in the end, there are a lot more resourcing and resources for people who are struggling to
Yeah,
afford.
absolutely. What about like flat nipples, or what about latch problems, or what about low supply? Like there's so many things that are hard about breastfeeding. So just to slap a label on breast milk's best for your baby, we've done our work and go, but not provide that support that they need, that like made the huge difference for me being able to nurse and for so many other women, then it's just a facade. It's just a pretty face. You're not actually advocating for women.
I love how you put people from the community through training
Yeah.
to become lactation consultants and in their own community, because like you said, I mean, that's going to have the biggest return is educating the community. And that's really awesome.
You were saying that the difficulty is about being able to produce formula locally. And you spoke about regulation. Is that from the government in Nigeria regulation that there's so that only Nestle is one that meets these qualifications to be accepted in Nigeria?
Yeah, I believe so. I'm not totally sure how all that works. And there's a couple other um, formula options in the country that I've seen, just not very accessible in the way that you won't see it very often. It's not like you can buy it. It's not always in the market. It's very rare, but something you'll always see is the Nestle brand. And yeah, I don't understand how it all works. I do know we had a Nestle representative come to my clinic a couple months ago, and I buy so much formula from them, because I'm feeding so many babies, 100 plus babies at a time that need, I don't know, ten things of formula per month. So you can imagine how much money I spend on formula. It's a lot. I'm probably their biggest customer in our state, at least. So they came to kind of meet their biggest customer, and I explained what I did. And I was very clear, like, this is because of formula is also the problem. It's the solution and the issue in a lot of ways. It's not the best solution. I think advocating for moms is the best solution, which you guys know that. But I was explaining this to the representative, and she was like, "Yes, yes, we love what you're doing with our product. This is why we do this. It's because we want to save lives." And I'm like, wait, we're on different pages here. She like wanted to take pictures of some of the babies in my clinic, and take it back and show their headquarters, like what their product is doing, saving lives. And it was just, there's just such a disconnect between, yeah, the problem and the solution. I don't understand why it happens that way, but if people give me formula for the babies, and they want me to ship it over, it's not legal. It's contraband.
Yeah.
I'm not allowed to bring it into the country, which I'm sure there's import export reasons for all of that. I don't understand all of it, but I do know that there's definitely a monopoly, and the amount of money, like I can't explain. It's just it's so expensive to the average Nigerian family. It's almost like buying it's almost like buying like a car every 3 months in the US standards.
Wow,
That
just to
is
feed your
nuts.
baby.
Yeah. And if I'm sorry, that just really got me. Like if you had a local one and it was much cheaper than Nestle
Yeah.
because it's local, and then no one's going to buy Nestle if the local one's available. So then either Nestle is going to get pushed out or they have to lower their prices. But with the
Right.
monopoly, yeah.
We do use like oh, so the local hospital does make this like nutritional mix of local ingredients. And so as soon as the babies turn 6 months, it's just not approved for babies under 6 months. But as soon as the babies
Mm.
turn 6 months, we switch them to like the local option, which is much more affordable. It's called
Mm.
PAP. But as far as we've seen, none of the stuff that has been made locally can sustain an infant in a way that helps them to grow and has the proper nutrients other than formula, unfortunately,
I would be
under 6 months.
very, very interested to know the financial lobbying that goes into these restrictions. And just because I know that formula companies in the US lobby against like maternity leave, and they lobby against like certain things that are going to cut their profits because they know that if moms stay home with babies, their chances of formula or breastfeeding are going to be a little bit more. So, I just wonder how much money is being spent to kind of maintain that monopoly on the first 6 months of life. It's just, and that's probably a little conspiratorial, but I just know that things like that happen and it goes on, and it's a little more rampant than I realized prior to starting this podcast and these adventures we've been on.
Yeah, it's wild to see up close.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. You know, if you guys are interested in supporting this ministry, it is Carry Them Ministries, and your Instagram tag is at Carry Them Ministries. You can also see them on carrythem.org as well.
All right, great. I always think about this like, I know you guys probably have some controversial things that you talk about and people don't like it. I don't know. But people don't usually um, I mean, people use formula because they have to, obviously, in the US. And I know that formula does save lives and people need to use it. But I'm also often talking about how it can kill babies, and people don't like that. So you might get, I don't know if you get any.
I'm going to get hate. I know. Okay. I'm going to, between these two episodes, I know I am. And I'm hoping that people can see that we're talking about bigger systems here that aren't like individual things. These are big systemic issues that are taking advantage of populations that shouldn't be being taken advantage of, should be, protected. I am kind of bracing myself for getting kind of tore up on this one. But I do think it's important to spread awareness because people don't know this stuff. And I didn't know a lot of this stuff. And we want babies to be fed and we want them to be healthy. And that can look very different in different circumstances. And it sounds like in your situation, people are being taken advantage of and on a big systemic level.
Yeah, and you'll see it a lot with like foreign aid things. I don't know if you ever see people asking for money in the U.S. for even in war zones or everything, it's always like send as much. You can support 500 babies by sending this much formula over. And I'm like, are all of them not breastfeeding? Like, why are we doing that? Like, it doesn't make sense to me that a lot of times in Nigeria, you'll even see ads, or at least I see it. I don't know if other people do because of the algorithm, but I see ads all the time of like, oh, like this village is super impoverished. We can send this many tins of formula for their babies, like as if it's like better than supporting those moms with their own nutrition or providing lactation support or whatever it is. It's just there's such a thing that formula is the best thing, even if they don't realize they're saying it. So the U.S. side of it, people see it and they're like, yeah, that's how you feed babies, but they don't realize here, or at least in Nigeria, that is truly asking a mom to give up the one way they can affordably, sustainably feed their baby. If you leave in a couple months from now and they're fully formula fed and they can't buy another tin of formula, like you're asking for starvation.
Yeah, literally. Like there's no other
sustainable.
And that is predatory in and of itself, like from like the formula manufacturers.
Yeah. Totally.
Side.
You're just getting money from people that can't afford to pay it, and then when they run out of your product and they can't afford it anymore, they're just
Yeah. And as a reminder for listeners, that formula companies spend around $4 billion on marketing a year, and they target a lot of that to low to middle income countries. Like a lot of that money is being funneled.
If you look at the code of marketing, it's not law. Like people think, oh, that they're breaking, like it's not a law. And so it's so like hard for people to be like, oh no, all that's gone. That's in the past. There's a code of ethics now that they follow. No, I'm not seeing that.
Yeah. Right.
It's a code of ethics, not a law.
Exactly. They have to actually adopt it and enforce it. And that sounds like that's not happening. Well, very, very grateful. It was so nice to meet you.
Yes. Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Take care. Have a good rest of your day.